Take a network break. I'm Drew Conry Murray.
And I'm Jonna Johnson. The theme this week seems to be bolstering network and cloud vulnerabilities. We have announcements from HPE Aruba, Cisco, and Cloudflare on that theme. We also have some news on multi-cloud networking from Alkira, new DOCSIS specs for broadband cable, and an update from Arista's management software.
We're sponsored today by Fortinet. We're going to do a sponsored Tech Bites at the end of the episode. We're going to be talking about Secure Access Service Edge, or SASE, that brings together networking and cloud-delivered security services. We'll talk with Fortinet about unified SASE, that is, where a single provider offers both the networking and cloud elements of the service. We're going to discuss essential elements of unified SASE, Fortinet's notion of sovereign SASE, bringing Gen AI into the offering, and more. Jonna, before we get into the news, we had an FU, a follow-up. This listener wrote in to say, on Network Break 496, you discussed network slicing on the T-Mobile 5G network. I find this odd. I have worked with AT&T and Verizon as a consultant to design 4G, 5G private networks for police departments beginning in 2015. It provided a private closed system for police cruisers and other municipal endpoints. There was no internet and only backhaul to a private circuit at City Hall. I feel like the carriers are slapping a new term, network slicing, on an old technology just implemented in a different way. I guess, Jonna, to my understanding, private 4G or 5G means you're using like dedicated hardware and software and a specific portion of a licensed or unlicensed spectrum to build a private network. And network slicing actually is using shared infrastructure. And then there's logical or virtual segmentation to dedicate those resources and capacity, or essentially a slice.
That's exactly it, Drew. That's exactly the difference. The way to look at it is network slicing is to private networks as MPLS is to lease line routed networks. So yes, if you just want a single network that's entirely private and that nobody else uses, absolutely what this listener has designed will work. The idea here is that you are able to designate specific traffic flows as high priority and knock everything else in case of congestion, but use a shared network that is not dedicated to that high priority traffic. The reason you'd want to do that is, frankly, to save costs on infrastructure. When you talk about the hardware and software and switching infrastructure for 5G, it can pretty much add up, and it would be nice if you could get some commercial traffic on that.
Yeah, I assume private 5G would cost more and not have the same reach or coverage, or it would be really expensive if you were going to cover an entire municipality or city with private spectrum and equipment versus using network slicing on shared infrastructure.
Exactly. That's the whole reason to do it this way. The main criterion, of course, is that you should be able to get the same performance with network slicing as you can from a private network. Let's hope that's the case.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, take us into the news, Jonna.
Okay. HPE Aruba just announced that it is offering fixes for three critical vulnerabilities in Aruba access points. These are CVE 2024 42505, 42506, and wait for it, 42507. These were discovered by security researcher Eric de Jong, I'm not sure quite how to say his name, and disclosed directly to HPE through its bug bounty program. All three affect the command language interface for Aruba access points running instant AOS versions 8 and 10 and allow attackers to execute arbitrary code remotely, never a good thing.
Nope.
HPE has released fixes and notified customers, and Drew, I think you noted that there is no workaround, so you really have to update. You have to provide the update.
Actually, sorry, there is a workaround.
Okay.
HPE did put out workarounds. I mean, there was a patch and you should patch, but it's good to have the workarounds if, of course, patches can't happen instantly. So
yeah, and I think HPE also noted that there are no known exploits in the wild, at least as of now. However, the reason we wanted to highlight this, it's actually more interesting about the bug bounty program, which pays folks to find software bugs. And what's interesting to me is vendors used to treat this as very ancillary or even be afraid of it because they were afraid of the bad press, as opposed to looking at it, as they should, as a great way to fire harden their infrastructure before the attackers can get there. And I think the other thing to keep in mind is if you're listening to this and going, bug bounty hunting, that sounds fun. It can pay really well. Eric de Jong had a lovely interview, which we've got the link here, saying bug bounties have certainly impacted my life. While the housing market was quite tough at the time, and this was a couple of years ago, I was able to buy a nice house with a greatly reduced mortgage because of money I made off bug hunting. And then he adds, it was quite interesting to have to explain to mortgage agents and notarial staff that no money was being laundered. And that reminds me of a side note. A couple decades ago when I was working on preparing a company to go public, I was the CTO for that company. And I mentioned that one of our assets was we had a number of white hat hackers. And here it is, 3:00 in the morning because we're frantically trying to file the paperwork. I'm surrounded by accountants and lawyers. And they look at me and they go, wait a minute. how do you mitigate the risk of your white hat hackers going black hat? And I just looked at them and I said, rogue accountants and lawyers can do a hell of a lot more damage.
I think it's interesting that he was actually able to put money down on a house out of bug bounties. First, I think bug bounties are a really smart idea. I think vendors should get over the idea of being worried about security vulnerabilities. Everybody knows there's there. You might as well be offering rewards for people to bring you vulnerabilities as opposed to finding out about it the hard way. I didn't know that they could be that profitable, though. I thought it was sort of like low money for finding the bugs.
No, what they've done is, and we don't know exactly how much he got, but my guess is it's around 100,000 plus or minus, a lot. But basically, if you think of it from HPE's perspective, anything south of what they'd have to pay a top-notch security engineer for a year is probably decent. Sure. It's cost-effective for them. And obviously, if somebody's writing you a check for 1,000 or a couple 100,000 or a couple 100,000, right, you can certainly get a very nice house for that. And Eric also mentions that by design, this is his hobby, not his full-time job, but he does dedicate about 10 hours a week to it. So if you go and look at that article, there's also a link to another article which talks about do's and don'ts if you want to become a bug.
That's a much better side gig than driving
hunter.
Uber, it sounds like. All right, moving on. Cloudflare has announced a new tool that lets website owners set policies around how AI bots interact with their sites. For instance, you could block AI content scrapers, but allow AI bots that are just indexing your site for search purposes, or you could block everything or just monitor their behavior while you decide what's best for your org. It's primarily aimed at content creators who may worry that their content is being hoovered up without the content creator getting anything from it. That applies to scrapers as well as AI bots. The feature's available to customers using Cloudflare's web app firewall. If you want to block everything, the company provides essentially what it calls a big red block all button. You can also add more fine-grained rules in the WAF console if you want to decide what bots to allow and what not.
Well, I think one of the challenges here, though, is how do you know which bots are AI? And basically the answer is you don't. Cloudflare is relying on AI companies to be good internet neighbors and identify the purpose of their bots. Oh, hey, I'm AI and I want to scrape all your content illegally. Sure, that's going to work. Cloudflare isn't using AI of its own to try to detect or investigate whether something is bot activity. It just builds its policy and actions based on how the bots self-identify, which I think is a kind of a glaring hole in this, despite the fact that it's a good step in the right direction.
Yeah, I did an interview with Cloudflare about this, and they said, yes, they are relying on the bots to signal their intention and then building policies around that. They said they can also monitor bot activity because they do have the web app firewall monitors all kinds of bots activities, and they are confident that if the AI companies stop being good internet citizens and tagging their bots appropriately, they would still be able to identify the behavior happening and allow you to build policies. But I think, one of the reasons they rolled this out is because it does raise a question about the viability of the broader web. If you just rely on clicks and traffic, but AI search results mean people never bother to click through, what does that mean for content providers? So Cloudflare is giving these content providers a little bit of a way to fight back.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing. And honestly, I think of this as just the cookies notification on steroids. That's kind of the way to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. But if you're rolling out content and you are worried about bots scraping you without you getting anything out of it, you may want to look into this.
Absolutely. And just to round out the protecting against vulnerabilities theme, Cisco just announced a patch for the Cat 9000 switch vulnerability, which enables attackers to generate a control plane denial of service via the VLAN tag of death, which is great fun. By sending carefully crafted Ethernet frames to a Cat 9000, it's possible to exploit a vulnerability arising out of improper handling of VLAN tags in order to disable the control plane on the switch. Which means the switch would stop responding to pings, console access attempts, and remote command line interface access. There are no workarounds on the unpatched system, and the shutdown can only be overcome by reloading the OS. So you probably want to update your switches with the patch that Cisco announced in its September patch bundle. So bottom line here, I'm not sure there's any meta meaning to any of this other than if you're managing a Cat 9000 network, you probably want to be updating your software for this month's patch bundle.
I want to know who came up with VLAN tag of death. That sounds like too much fun for Cisco to have said that, but
yeah, that does sound like a hacker fun game, but yes, that is a good one.
Kudos to whoever came up with that. Moving on, Arista Networks is positioning its CloudVision management software as a platform to manage your data center, campus, and WAN networks. The big idea is that CloudVision provides a common operating model for network engineers. Its EOS software provides telemetry to an Arista data lake to support machine learning and automation. So yeah, CloudVision, Arista is essentially saying if you want to run all three of your major networks the same way, use Arista switches and use CloudVision and use other Arista gear. I think it's a great idea. The problem is that Arista has a very limited presence outside the data center in the enterprise. I think they're hoping to entice companies to switch to Arista switches and APs in the campus with the promise of this common operating model. They also have integrations with third-party devices, including VMware, vCenter, and CloudVision can also ingest SNMP and support OpenConfig and gRPC and gNMI, so it can provide some visibility into third-party devices, but it can't manage third-party devices. So again, Arista is trying to straddle between recognizing that it's got this CloudVision platform for managing things, but it doesn't have a lot of ties into third-party gear yet. And obviously, most enterprise networks are not going to be using a lot of Arista gear, probably outside of the data center.
Yeah, that's one of the things. Drew, do you think they're signaling some sort of strategic initiative in, say, 2025, where they're going to really push to compete against the, Cisco's, Arubas, and Junipers in the universe?
I mean, that's what this press release would tell me, but I feel like, Arista for a long time, it sort of flirts with sectors outside of the data center, the campus, the WAN, and so on, but never really makes that hard, serious push. I think they're assuming there's going to be a period of disruption during the HPE and Juniper acquisition. So maybe they're riding on that to get a chance to get campus buyers to take a closer look. But I feel like Arista makes most of their money from the data center. They make most of their money in the data center for hyperscalers, and that just has a lot of sort of like executive gravity that just sucks up all their attention. And so they make these occasional forays at like campus networks, but I have a hard time seeing Arista as being a serious competitor in the enterprise campus without really more effort around, marketing and promotion of their capabilities in that space. Maybe this is the first time, this is an effort that they'll try to do that, but it's got to be sustained. And I don't know if Arista is going to do that.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. A thought just occurred to me. I know one of our listeners accused us a couple of weeks ago of being too U.S.-centric, and we sort of, agree that that's an issue. I don't know how things are outside the U.S. It may be that Arista has the ability to, in markets that are less dominated by Cisco and Juniper, may be able to sort of start making some headway there. I don't know. Yeah,
I mean, they have a really tough way to get in. I mean, my take is for enterprise, the primary lever in there is wireless, and Arista just I almost hear nothing from them about their wireless portfolio. And if you want to try to get into the enterprise, that's a good way. And they just they don't say point. A lot. So they get a tough road.
And speaking of vendors adding capabilities to make themselves more attractive to the enterprise, Alkira is adding Google Cloud Platform to its multi-cloud networking as a service offering, which is kind of a big deal if you understand what Alkira does, which is basically they serve as a common management platform for getting connected to and configuring cloud environments across a multi-cloud scenario. So basically you can, with one click, move stuff from Azure to AWS and now to Google Cloud and, do all kinds of configurations that before Alkira would have taken you a team of dedicated Google or Azure or AWS engineers, which is actually a huge reduced cost in labor and reduced management overhead, which is kind of their attractiveness to the enterprise. But if you think about it, not having Google was kind of a hurt, and so it's for them at least it's a big deal that they've got Google now added into their portfolio.
Well, that's my question: is this that they've actually added Google Cloud to their portfolio, or is it just that it's they're now in the Google Cloud Marketplace, which is a different thing?
Yes, I think you're actually correct, but it does make you're right. They have been able to do Google in the past, and I sit corrected. What's different is that you're able to come in from Google and get this service, which they had already, I think, been in that space for both Amazon and for Microsoft. So depending on how you come in to join to all of this, if you're coming in through Google, you can now add Alkira is kind of the way to go. If you're not, as opposed to coming in from Alkira and adding Google.
Yeah, the companies like Alkira, and there's a couple of others out there doing this. The idea is that they want to provide a common operating model across all three public clouds, as opposed to you having to learn all of the intricacies of AWS and Azure and Google. You just do it in the Alkira console, and they sort of handle the fundamentals underneath to get you to get that network connectivity going in the public cloud. I feel like being added to the marketplace, it's about trying to make consumption and licensing and management easier for their customers, make procurement easier, and anything we can do on that end is always helpful.
Yep, and we will be having Alkira on to sponsor an episode of Heavy Strategy, so you can hear a bit more about the thinking behind this and how it works. So again, coming in through Google Marketplace.
Moving on, HPE has announced updates to its Aruba Central network management platform. The company says it added new AI models to provide insights faster, such as IoT device identification. HPE says it might have taken its AI models days or a week to identify an IoT device. It can now do it faster with these new models. I think what's more interesting is the company is adding monitoring of third-party network devices to Central, including Cisco, Juniper, and Palo Alto networks. So Central can show you the device maker, the device type, is it a switch, a firewall, an AP, etc., and the firmware and whether the device is up or down. This capacity comes from an HPE acquisition of a company called OpsRamp back in 2023. So it does require OpsRamp's probes in your network to get this information into Central. Couldn't get more details from HPE about it. They said this is going to actually be available toward the end of the year, so they'll have more details as the availability gets closer to release.
Yeah, I think this is actually a very interesting move because on the one hand, it's perfect logical sense, which is what we have come to expect from HPE, you know, this notion of, hey, let's expand our reach in IoT, let's expand our reach to third-party vendors. On the other hand, they're sort of doubling down on management as a major differentiator. And the problem with that is, at least in the past, companies that invested heavily in management and pushed it as a differentiator always lost to the companies that were doing the hardware, you know, latest and greatest things. Mm-hmm. And I'm just wondering if the universe has changed enough that people are going to say, wow, we really need to buy this HPE because of its incredible management capabilities, particularly in the areas of IoT and third-party management. I'm hoping that's the case because it ought to be, but ought to be and are two different things in a lot of cases. Yeah,
and I guess I just want to be careful. That it doesn't sound like you can actually do a lot of management of these third-party devices.
Monitoring.
You get some visibility, but I think it's a smart move for HPE to recognize that it's not the only player in the enterprise campus. If Central becomes more valuable as a tool, even just for monitoring and observability, that makes Central more sticky. And we'll see if it sounds like with this OpsRamp's acquisition, maybe they'll be able to do more with this further down the line as the product continues to get integrated. So hoping to get more details as the availability date comes closer.
Yeah, and I would just say that in my head, monitoring is a subset of management, but you're right. There's no active management here. It's at this point just monitoring and seeing what's going on.
Yeah.
Okay. And in news that I'm not sure is entirely earth-shattering, but at least it's worthy of note, there is an industry coalition taking on the development of 25 gig broadband over existing infrastructure and DOCSIS 4. Basically, by combining new chipsets with AI and ML techniques, joint venture partners Broadcom, Charter, and Comcast intend to build, wait for it, guys, a new set of DOCSIS standard technologies for cable broadband. The DOCSIS 4 compatible set of technologies will embed Broadcom neural processing units and endpoint modems, as well as amplifiers and core network nodes. Among other improvements, the vendors hope to bring real-time traffic pattern recognition and optimization and lower power use with predictive power management. On the one hand, it sounds like technically it's really quite interesting how they've done this. On the other hand, really? Better cable broadband? Okay, what is this, 1999?
I have to say, Jonna, when I saw DOCSIS show up in the show notes, my eyes kind of glazed over, and I was like, I'm just going to let Jonna handle this one.
Yeah, I went back and forth on whether we'd even include it, but then I thought, you know, it's probably not the end of the world to let people know that no matter how aged and seemingly irrelevant a technology is, there are people spending money on making it better. And, for certain scenarios, this may actually be good. I actually thought the lower power use was kind of an interesting twist, with all the concerns that people have been having about power consumption and power use and all that stuff. I thought it was actually kind of interesting that they did it that way.
And you could see cable operators being interested in that real-time pattern recognition, the traffic pattern recognition and optimization if they need to do as they're managing the capacity of these cable connections. So.
Exactly. And they have, millions of customers. So it's good to see them investing, in improving the services for their customers, although they'll figure out a way to charge us for it, I'm sure.
Of course. Absolutely. Nothing comes from it.
That's what they do.
And Johnny, you've got kind of a not really a surfing dog story, but just some interesting research coming out of U.S. Navy on protecting ships.
Yeah, this was just a weird one. I call it lightsabers at sea because it sounds like it might actually be that. The U.S. Navy Naval Research Lab reached out to the industry and said, we need help developing electromagnetic weapons for use against anti-ship threats, small boat terrorists, which is really a thing, military swarm attack, high seas pirates, and aircraft. And there was a company called Envisioneering Inc. in Alexandria, Virginia, that raised its hand and managed to net itself a $99 million 5-year contract to design prototype electromagnetic weapon systems and evaluate RF and millimeter wave effects and technologies. And it says one primary focus is on ship defense directed energy technologies like, and this is quote, high power radio frequency, high energy and high power lasers. There's our space our sea lasers. Yeah. And electrostatic discharge ESD systems. This is really interesting and innovative, and I just can't imagine what happens when all of these various energy forms hit metal ships. It could be quite fun.
Yeah. So do you feel like this is about, going after the actual humans operating the ships, or is it more about the electronic equipment operating like weapon systems and radar and all that?
Well, the Navy is careful to say it's vessel stopping technologies. So it's really about making your ship not go in the water, which reminds me, my father, who is now dead, but many years ago, I asked him why he went into the Navy as part of the military. And he said, well, basically, if you're in the Army or Air Force, you're trying to kill other people. If you're in the Navy, you're just trying to stop their ships. And I was like, that's an interesting point of view, because basically you can have a ship full of 10,000 crew and it's useless if it can't go anywhere.
So eventually this is $99 million to make ship not go.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
But make bad ship not go.
Right. Yeah. Make the right ships not go. Exactly. Yes.
Right.
All right. We'll have a link to that story in the show notes along with everything else we covered. Thank you for listening. Please do stay tuned for our Tech Bytes conversation with Fortinet. We're going to be talking about unified SASE. That's coming right up. Secure Access Service Edge, or SASE, brings together networking and cloud-delivered security services. On today's Tech Bytes podcast, we talk with sponsor Fortinet about unified SASE. That is where a single provider offers both the networking and cloud elements of the service. We discuss essential elements of unified SASE, Fortinet's notion of sovereign SASE, bringing Gen AI into the offering, and more. Our guest is Nirav Shah, VP of Products and Solutions at Fortinet. Nirav, welcome back to the podcast. So first, what does Fortinet mean by unified SASE? What are the components essential to a unified SASE approach?
Yeah, thanks, Drew. Great having been here again. Fortinet's unified SASE is really our approach to provide a single vendor solution which can enable secure access for this hybrid workforce, accessing any application securely with the zero trust principles. Are there also components to that are essential to this approach? What are the pieces and parts that I'm looking for in a unified SASE solution? Yeah, look, when we look at the unified SASE, there are two key core components. One part is the cloud-delivered security services edge, what we call FortiSASE. Mm-hmm. This is where we consolidate all of the main functionality from Secure Web Gateway, CASB, ZTNA, to DLP functionality. And we also make sure that this is well integrated with our on-prem SD-WAN solution. But Drew, what's key here is while the SASE discussion is not new, we have been discussing for last couple of years or more, it is more important that we have single unified console. And that's why I think the unified SASE as a naming makes sense, because you want to provide a management where you can consider all of these capabilities I talked about and have a single SaaS-based management. And same for agent, right? It's not just connecting from an SD-WAN, but along with that, you want to make sure the connectivity is flexible. So we often talk about the benefits ranging from unified, flexibility, and intelligent to showcase how the secure internet access, private access, SaaS access could be done.
I think you're getting to why I would want to do this. I mean, a lot of the people listening, Nirav, would have deployed maybe multiple vendor network solutions. So they've got their core network provided by someone and their SASE may be provided by someone else. You're arguing for unified SASE. So, and again, I think you're getting to it already, but why? What are the benefits of me doing it this way?
Yeah, I think the first thing that we hear a lot from our customers is this need for a consistent protection, consistent enforcement. So as you rightly said, it's very normal for customers to have a on-prem firewall and SD-WAN solution from one vendor and this cloud-delivered SSE solution from second vendor. But oftentimes when you have that, the security is inconsistent, right? The management has been not that streamlined. The integration has been a problem. So there is more desire to consolidate those solutions. So now, whether it's firewall, SD-WAN on-prem or SSE on the cloud, if vendor can provide a consistent management, consistent security updates, then it's much easier for them. And that's where the unified SASE kind of helps them on that journey.
You talk about tool fatigue. If I've got SASE or SSE services provided by someone different from who my core network might be, then I'm hopping from tool to tool to tool to make all this stuff happen. And what you're arguing is that, hey, if I do unified SASE with Fortinet, then I've got a consistent interface, consistent policy, and so on across that infrastructure.
Exactly, Ethan. And is important there is it's hard to kind of build that consistency. But we go back to the FortiOS, the software which we built on firewall for last 20 plus years. And that FortiOS actually provides the full stack of SASE that we talked about. So for Fortinet, it's been always about how can we deliver the same capabilities which is available on-prem to also for SSE, right? And that's where we build this global cloud network and enable those services. So now it's flexible for customers. Where do you want to use the SASE stack? Right. And that's been very helpful to them.
So, of course, you can't have a conversation about IT today without talking about AI. Can you talk about what Fortinet's doing in regards to Gen AI and incorporating it into your SASE solution?
Yeah, certainly. Look, the generative AI and the way we can help our customers to simplify NOC operations and for SOC has been top of our mind. So what we did is we introduced FortiAI. That's our Gen AI assistant available as a feature as part of our NOC and SOC tools. And really the idea here is for our NOC tools, it can use or it can support 30 different languages. So customers can use voice to text for a simple questions which can be converted into the Fortinet configuration. And we can do other things to simplify that day zero and day one configuration as well.
So you're talking about the capability to use sort of natural language queries if I want to extract some kind of information out of a dashboard or the console that I'm working from.
Exactly. So now let's say you just want to know more details about how many IoT devices we have across the network. The Gen AI tool, that FortiAI feature will help you provide that data. It can further drill down and provide do they have any vulnerabilities for those IoT devices and can further go down as well. So a lot of such use cases we enabled for SD-WAN, for IoT devices, as well as for threat hunting on the SOC side as well.
So what is your Gen AI model trained on? It sounds like it has knowledge of network topology, maybe network telemetry is being used as well?
Exactly. I think what we started doing is we started training them on specific use cases. So our initial use cases, look, you wanted to build an SD-WAN topology. Rather than rewriting all the configuration, you can literally upload an image with hub and spoke, and we can enable that as a configuration, which can be drilled down to all the sites. So we have now identified the use cases and then rolled out as part of those tools.
One concern that folks have with AI is that it means a lot of data is being collected, probably put in a cloud somewhere. What are you doing to make sure that sensitive telemetry data is protected?
I mean, the privacy is absolutely key, right? And we make sure that the data that we are processing, we are masking them. So privacy has been always the top priority there. Also, a lot of information is being done locally. So we have a local proxy service there as well to do that. So yes, Drew, making sure the privacy is key as well as the accuracy of responses. We don't want to support everything. So we are very clear about which use cases are supported. And if you're asking anything outside of the scope, then we are very clear on those answers.
Okay, so instead of making something up, it'll just say, I don't know.
Correct.
Which is exactly what I would prefer, honestly.
Yes.
Now, there's a technique that's being deployed more often called retrieval augmented generation, which is a way to enhance a model that's been previously trained on a set of information to add new data to that. Are you able to incorporate RAG into your AI?
We certainly support that, Drew, yeah. And that's where I was referring to earlier, where the documentation access, the technical documentation, which we can retrieve and make sure we provide the information accurately based on those questions is key. So we started using the RAG technology as well.
Okay, so as new updates get made to documentation, I'm assured that I'm getting the most clear and correct answers from my Gen AI interface because of RAG.
Exactly.
Well, if we can't have a conversation without talking about AI, we also can't have a conversation without talking about zero trust, Nirav. So the serious question here, if we're talking about unified SASE, does that mean I have end-to-end zero trust with that sort of an architecture?
The zero trust is always about the mindset, right? I mean, you wanted to develop those core principles of zero trust, making sure the users are having an explicit access. We are doing a continuous verification. So yes, some of those capabilities like ZTNA is part of unified SASE. And in fact, it's very popular because some of the earlier use cases that customers are adopting is about secure private access using those zero trust mindset, where we are verifying the identity, users, device posture. But one thing, Ethan, that comes up a lot is how soon we are doing that continuous verification. And we try to do near real time. So almost 45 to 60 seconds, we check the device posture. And if it is not right, then the access will not be granted to users for those applications.
So I just want to dig in on that then. If I've already established a connection, I'm working in an application, and then something on my endpoint changes, you can, within, say, a 60-second window, be like, oh, it looks like a phishing attack just took place, and we're going to now knock you off the network. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, because, Drew, the endpoint that we talked about, that endpoint, we can have several tags. And some of the tags, if the users are not comply with in that 60-second check, then yes, IT team can enforce and terminate that connection. But what's also interesting is oftentimes the ZTNA discussion is always about you need to do that in vendor's cloud, right? So you have to send it to our SSC. Mm-hmm. We also started doing that in on-prem. So if our customers are using firewall or SD-WAN, we can also do the same zero trust application gateway functionality right there. So having that flexibility has been very important. And then certainly we can terminate connection if they are not following those tags.
So is this a use case where I've got, say, like a traditional client server app in my data center, and I've got a firewall complex in front of that, as opposed to shunting traffic back out to a cloud for inspection and then back around again? I can just go through the firewall complex and get that same zero trust and continuous assessment?
Exactly. And in fact, at Fortinet, we have deployed for our own employees as well. Certainly every organization are going to have some private application in that campus or in some of the data center. So this gives them flexibility on where is the application and which technology is deployed there, rather than always sending the traffic to the cloud and then do that application gateway and enforcement check. So yeah, we do give that flexibility, and we call it a kind of a universal ZTNA because now it allows you to universally do that enforcement where your users and applications are.
Okay, so we've got universal unified SASE.
Yeah, making it easy, aren't we?
U squared SASE.
No, unified SASE is definitely an offering name, and the ZTNA is one of the capability, one of the feature, which is universally applied where customers want.
So this ability to do local inspection brings up this notion of sovereign SASE. Can you talk about what sovereign SASE means?
Yeah. So as we talked about our FortiSASE offering, over the last several years, as our focus has been building the most global cloud network, right? And we now have over 150 point of presence. So customers can use where the users are. Now we have seen two types of users, right? There are certain countries where they prefer that the POP is following the local regulation. The data resides in that specific country. So we do support that for several countries. And that is one of the use case customers have adopted. But then we have seen this second requirement where there are large financial customers or service providers. They even prefer to have their own data center, where those data centers they want to use as a POP for a security processing. So Drew, we are now rolling out sovereign SASE, where we can facilitate customers to build that infrastructure with a lot of automation that we provide.
So you're saying I'm essentially running SASE capabilities, but inside my own private data center, as opposed to having to shunt traffic into a public cloud instance?
Exactly. So you can have those data centers, which are your customer's data center. They are running for example, let's say the FortiGate nodes, which does the security processing, but it is owned by you. The security processing and logs remains there. We do provide orchestration. So we provide the flexibility of orchestration and graphical user interfaces from our locations, but everything about data plane and logs remains with customers.
But I can also control, if I'm not doing that, I don't want to bring all that in. I still want to use the Fortinet cloud. I can control where in the world, which POPs are accessible by my endpoints.
Certainly. Yes. And that's where I mentioned, Ethan, we have seen the privacy and data residency requirement varies depending on the user, depending on the customer profile. A lot of customers are happy as long as, that particular Fortinet point of presence is following the local regulation. But there are some extreme requirement for customers where they wanted to own the data center and own the entire data flow and more.
So what are my other consumption options here? Is this, I guess I should put it this way. I've got Fortinet boxes. I tend to think of you guys as like delivering me a box that I put in a rack and I plug it in and it does things. But if I'm consuming SASE services, and a lot of those are cloud-based, should I think of that as a SaaS offering then?
Absolutely. I mean, FortiSASE is really a SaaS offering. We are offering that across all of those 150 POPs where customers can just connect via agent or an agentless, and we provide an inline inspection via the cloud network. It comes with its own SaaS management, so FortiSASE management, which can manage all those 15 SSE capabilities through a one console. And there are a lot of flexibility of how you connect to FortiSASE. One I talked about is agent, which is FortiClient Unified Agent. Agentless, you can use SD-WAN. You can use access point, which is very unique for a micro branches. Our access points also integrates with that.
But the fact that it's being delivered as SaaS means I get things like I don't have to worry about the hardware. I don't have to worry about power. I don't have to worry about scaling. That's handled for me because this is essentially software as a service.
Yes. So as exactly the way you described, we take care of all the software upgrades, maintenance updates, what typical SaaS service do. But Drew, what's exciting is this is on our rapid monthly release. So we are rolling out new innovations as we go. For example, we just rolled out more innovations into remote browser isolation and ZTNA, secure private access. So we do those and customers take advantage of those monthly new innovations.
Okay, right. That's the other part of SaaS is that the application stack tends to get upgraded more quickly as well.
Correct.
So Nirav, last question then. We've been talking about SASE. We've been talking about it as a SaaS service, but there is also an endpoint piece, a client piece. This is more than just a VPN client or a firewall client, yeah?
Yes. So FortiClient, which is our software agent we are developing since last 15 years, can do a lot more, right? And not only it can provide the connectivity for VPN, Zero Trust, SASE, and digital experience monitoring, but it can also do an endpoint protection. It can also integrate with our NAC products and all. In fact, Drew, just in a few days, you will see that we will be talking about EDR integration as part of the same agent. So now you have EDR available with all the other functionality I talked about to provide that true unified agent.
All right. Well, if folks want to find out more about the unified SASE offering or anything else from Fortinet, Nirav, where do you recommend they go?
Yeah, go to our website, Fortinet.com. On the homepage, you will find a lot of information about the SASE and the summit.
And you guys are holding a SASE summit coming up, right?
Yeah, that is something I'm really excited about because a lot of things we talked about today, the SASE summit, we are going to do live demonstration about unified agent and the FortiSASE, and we'll talk about sovereign SASE in depth as well. So yes, look forward to that.
All right. So if you want to get that information, go to Fortinet.com and just find the links for the SASE Summit. It's happening October 10th. You can register for that or also get a replay. Nirav, thank you for being here, and we appreciate Fortinet being a sponsor. And as always, thank you for listening. You can find this and many more fine free technical podcasts along with our community blog. It's all at packetpushers.net. You can find us on LinkedIn. You can hear us on Spotify. And if you would, leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts. And last but not least, remember that too much networking would never be enough.